Hello everyone, this is International Master Bryan Smith with ChessLecture.com, bringing to you an online video. In this video I'm going to be looking at the game Svidler versus Ivanchuk from Nalchick, the FIDE GrandPrix. This was played I think last Wednesday or something, April 20 something, and this was round 2. Svidler was white, and this game came to my attention because it's so crazy, and it really looks like a Coffeehouse game, you know, from the 19th century, you know, in the Café de la Régence in Paris or something like that, and you expect that after the game maybe Ivanchuk's going to put his money on the table and then they're going to play another game. So this was, and the final position's kind of picturesque too, and I like this game. Of course, they don't play at the level of the Coffeehouse players, they play at a much higher level. And that's what makes it so interesting. But Svidler played, well, we'll see, sort of a Coffeehouse-looking move, but it provoked Ivanchuk. So Svidler is white, and he started off with e4. Now e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5. Now both players, of course, have played the Spanish from both sides many times. Ivanchuk played a6, bishop a4, knight f6, castles, and now b5, bishop b3, and here more popular is bishop c5, but Ivanchuk decided to go with the Archangel, bishop b7. And, well, you never know what opening to expect from Ivanchuk. He can play any opening in the entire openings in all of chess. And Svidler got this one. So it's not been so popular recently because of, I think because of the move d3. And in this case, white takes this quiet setup, and the bishop on b7 doesn't really belong there as much. For example, in the currently real popular Molar variation, bishop c5, d3 is not very crucial at all. This is just like basically avoiding any debate at all, as far as I can tell. And black doesn't play bishop b7, he plays something like d6 or maybe castles first, but then the bishop either comes out to g4 or maybe comes to e6 and trades off white's light squared bishop, but it doesn't go to b7. So in the Archangel, black is going here, and this kind of now d3 makes a lot more sense. And the thing is, the difference is bishop c5, now the most critical here is thought to be a setup with c3 and d4. Sometimes white plays a4 first, sometimes not, but anyway, c3 and d4 is more critical. And the point is that after, for example, c3, black can't take on e4. It's too dangerous. White plays d4 and hits the bishop on c5. So after c3, black plays d6, for example. There's other move also, but d6, d4, bishop b6, and this is a typical thing. But in the Archangel, bishop b7, if white tries to go c3 and d4, here black can take on e4. And d4 doesn't hit the bishop, so black's able to get away with that. And there's some theory on that. It's an attempt for white, but it theoretically doesn't lead to any advantage. So for a while, white was playing rook e1 and then c3 and d4, but the rook doesn't, you know, in these sharp variations, white's already committed his rook to e1 and spent a tempo on it. Maybe he wants to do something else. Especially with the bishop on c5, he may want to leave it on f1, guarding f2. So people don't really play rook e1, and d3 has become the critical move here. Now Ivanchuk played bishop e7. This is also the most common move. Bishop c5 might look more aggressive, but it's probably not, it's not as popular here. White typically, well, there's several different ways of playing. You can play bishop e3 and trade it off. That's one way of trying to take advantage of it. But also just at some point playing knight c3 and pinning the knight with bishop g5 and creating pressure on the d5 square. And black can't break the pin because his bishop will be on c5 rather than e7. So bishop e7 more popular. And now Svidler played a4. And what ends up happening is we transpose into a variation of the anti-martial. So I would say that he's not trying to take advantage of Ivanchuk's Archangel move order. Svidler's just going into what he knows well, the anti-martial, which is just, you know, a different move order totally, but we get to a position like this. And you know, that's certainly possible, but more critical is probably something like knight c3. avoiding transposing into a variation that's considered okay for black. It's all a matter of taste. So he played a4, trying to use the fact that the b5 pawn is sticking out. Black now castled, and white played rook e1. So I mean, he can do different move orders, and I don't know if there's any nuances in it. I certainly don't understand them. I mean, of course, I suppose he could play knight d2 there as well. Anyway, but he played rook e1, and he's preparing the standard maneuver: knight d2, knight f1, knight g3, which happens a lot in the Spanish. Now Ivanchuk played d6, knight d2, and rook e8. This is very slow position. It's like he's doing another typical Spanish maneuver. Moves the rook to e8, bishop drops back to f8, and that clears up the e-file, gets his pieces so they're not in each other's way. And he might continue to fianchetto the bishop by playing g6 and bishop g7, or he might not. But in any case, rook e8 and bishop f8 is a useful maneuver, and there's not a whole lot else for black to do in this position. So that's pretty standard. Now knight f1, white gets his knight over to greener pastures on the king side. H6. This is, if bishop to f8 right away, then bishop g5 is kind of annoying. And then, for example, h6, I think in this case, bishop h4, g5 is probably okay for black. He can guard the f5 square, and I guess it's okay. But white can take on f6, and after queen takes bishop d5, this type of maneuver leads to a pleasant position for white. So we've given up the two bishops, but the pin on the long diagonal is kind of annoying, and most likely the light-squared bishops will be exchanged then, and black will be left with the one on f8, which is blocked in, versus a knight, which has some nice squares on d5, f5, and also white can put some pressure on black's advanced queenside pawns. So this is a typical maneuver, and there's no sense in Ivanchuk allowing that, so he played h6 first. Now knight e3, and it's always a tough question to say where this should go, to e3 or to g3. Here, I guess it's maybe a little bit more flexible on e3. It might go into d5 in some variations, but in any case, I guess Svidler had a specific idea in mind. I don't know if he prepared this. It looks kind of dubious, but we'll see what it is. Bishop f8, and now I was looking at this position, and I kind of I think I would probably play the same dubious move that Svidler played. It's just my style, and because I like to make the game concrete, and he did the same thing. Although objectively, it's like a coffeehouse move. His move was g4, which is it's not the move I would expect from the vast majority of grandmasters, but it's still a very interesting move, and it reminds me of the game Lasker versus Napier. I don't know, you might be aware of it. It's a very famous game. And Lasker played a move like this, g4. It was in the dragon, so it's a different scenario, but still the same idea. It pretty much forces black to counter in the center to try to take advantage of white's wing attack. And if he doesn't, actually, white will get a real attack. And when black creates his counterattack in the center, the game becomes very sharp. And I wouldn't say white's better or anything, but I might even say he's worse, but it creates a sort of sharp game, and that was Lasker's style, and maybe to a certain extent, well, at least how Svidler was playing this day, he did a similar type of thing. Besides g4, it's really hard for white to find a plan in this position. I mean, you can make several slight improvements in your position, but it's hard to say it's hard to play d4 here, because black has a lot of pressure on e4. So in most cases, black will just take the e4 pawn. So I mean, c3 is of course a normal move, but maybe black continues g6 and then bishop g7, queen d7. He's got a lot of moves he can make, and there's not a huge amount for either side to do here. So maybe Svidler just wasn't in the mood for that type of game. So he played the crazy move g4, and now black needs to counter in the center, and Ivanchuk did this correctly. He played knight d4. It looks like a good move. Very classical response. If he didn't, just an example, white's g4 move is